the podcast that explores new and exciting historical fiction novels. I'm your host, Jane Healey, and in today's episode, we welcome best-selling author Erika Robuck to discuss her latest Prohibition-era novel, The Last 12 Miles, which Historical Novel Society praised as a tightly plotted thriller and an eye-opening and compelling read. Welcome, Erika. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. I'm so happy to finally be here. I've been
Yeah, this
admiring
is
this from a
awesome.
distance. I'm so honored you invited me.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I'm going to do a quick bio on you, although I think a lot of people here already know you, but and then I will dive into questions. So, Erika Robuck, nationally best-selling author of historical fiction, including Sisters of Night and Fog, The Invisible Woman, and Hemingway's Girl. Her articles have appeared in Writer Unboxed, Crime Reads, and Writer's Digest, and she has been named Maryland Writers Association Notable Writer of 2024. Congratulations on that. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I have to tell you, when I saw the announcement, I think you posted the deal announcement on Instagram or something when Publishers Weekly for this book, and I was like, oh, that's such a great premise. I was so
Oh,
thrilled with this idea. So tell everyone about the premise of this novel and the two women, like remarkable women at the center of it.
yeah. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's two women on two sides of the law in a game of cat and mouse. And both of the women are from history. They're real women. This is a real woman's story. But it's relevant to the present day, just the how you balance work, life, motherhood, all of it. But these women are interesting because one of them was the first woman to train cryptanalysts and really helped invent the science with her husband. And the other one became a notorious rum runner. So they're very different, but they also have a lot in common. So it was a joy to write the story and with the settings, and it was a pure delight from start to finish.
Yeah, and it totally comes through in the writing. I really loved at the beginning, you have notes at the end of the book and you have a note at the beginning of the book. I nerd out on all that stuff.
Oh, good.
And totally. And I loved your note at the beginning of the book because I know of, as a historical fiction writer, I know of Elizebeth Friedman, but you said when you were on tour for your last book, people said you should write about her. And
Yes.
I was like, that's one of the reasons when I saw the announcement of this story, I was like, yes, finally someone is writing a novel about this remarkable
Oh, wow.
woman.
Yeah.
So tell everyone about her and her husband William and how amazing they were.
Well, I will. This isn't the author's note, but I will just point out it was three different people at three different places that told me I should write about Elizabeth. And I'm always just kind of filing information. But when the third one, I got home with a basket she'd given me of goodies, which was so nice and over the top. The biography of Elizabeth Friedman that came out several years ago was in there. And so I felt like, all right, I need to read this. And I became completely enraptured with her. Her career really spanned the Great War through Prohibition, World War II, and beyond. She and her husband were Renaissance, I guess you'd say Renaissance man or woman. They had a deep interest in Mayan culture and Shakespeare. They were musical. They used to have dinner parties where you would have to figure out and decipher code to even know what date the dinner party was, to know which course you were on. And then it was really, they hung out with a lot of really smart people. All that is way beyond me, but they were just a captivating pair. And I also loved writing about them because they had
I
this,
don't know
oh,
what
look at that. I know, it's so exciting. Cheers.
I don't know how I did that, but okay.
But they really supported each other. They would always say, "Oh, he's the better cryptanalyst. She's the better cryptanalyst." And they had such a dear relationship, and it was just a joy to be able to explore that too. But because I had just written two World War II novels, I needed a break from it. It's obviously a very intense time, so I really zeroed in on the prohibition aspects. Drinking settings are very lovely, and it was new. It felt very fresh. So I was able to do that. But I knew that Elizabeth had caught a female Axis spy in World War II, but I wanted to find a female Rumrunner, and asking you shall receive. I found her. So it was a joy when I finally got her, and it was just enough of her story where I had a little bit of wiggle room and playroom, but there were enough bones there to make a novel out of it.
Yeah, that was actually my next question because it sounds like the rum runner Marie Waite was who was Elizabeth's adversary in this. It sounds like she was kind of more of a mythical figure, like there wasn't as much out there about her. So talk a little bit about discovering her and what you learned.
Yeah, so it was kind of like following the trajectory that Elizabeth would follow. I was at the Coast Guard files. I see this boat she apprehended. I find the name of the man. I'm looking in newspapers from the 1920s. I find his name in a dance academy, and with it is his wife, and it just says Mrs. C.W. Waite. But when you look at the picture of the two of them, she totally steals the show in the picture because she's not like a Mrs. C.W. Waite. I needed to know more about the woman who was glaring out from this picture. And so the more I dug in, that's where I started to find all the lore. So you have a book about rum runners where there's maybe a paragraph about Spanish Marie, the infamous gunslinging wench, 6 feet tall, puts concrete blocks on her lover's feet. And it was just so over the top. And when I finally dug down and found her, there was little funny things, like she was 5 feet tall and she had brown eyes, not blue eyes. So there
Right,
were,
right, right.
but you can see how the lore gets spun up, especially with the newspapers at the time, where this was the clickbait of the time, and they used to play up the good guys and the bad guys, the cops and robbers. A lot of them were on the side of the rum runners against the feds, so they would make a Peter Pan figure out of
Wow.
them, or Robin Hood figure, excuse me. So it was just a lot of hijinks and wild stuff that I could never have made up on my own.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, totally fascinating. To that point, you did extensive research from for this book. There's a bibliography in the back. There's notes. Um, what's your research process like? Do you do a bunch up front? Do you kind of do it as you go? Like, what's your whole process like?
Yeah, I try to spend about 4 to 6 months exclusively on research, and that entails reading everything I get my hands on, from the internet to biographies to archives. It's such a beautiful time to be alive because so many internet archives are now available from our homes. And then I try to go where I can do hands-on research, meet with people in the Coast Guard for this one, interview people in the Coast Guard. And then actually I got to the National Archives, has all the Coast Guard records from the very beginning, when basically it was Alexander Hamilton's branch of the Treasury, all the way up to the present, what's declassified to the present day. Elizabeth's things have been largely declassified because they took place in the 20s, although not all of it. But a lot of our procedures are still used today for what she found. But when I was able to go through all of that at the National Archives, it was hugely helpful. Also, the Friedmans donated their papers to the George Marshall Library, which is outside the Virginia Military Institute. It was closed for renovations a lot of the time, but the archivist there was so helpful. So I could tell her, I need to find these documents or these photographs or these letters from this time, and she would send them to me. So it's a very much like that. And what I'm doing when I'm searching these archives is looking for the plot of the novel, because I'm not really actually very creative. I just need to find the high stakes. I need to find the climax and see where the character arc is going to be. And once I find that in history, then I'm off to the races. So
Right.
luckily it all came together.
Was there anything in the research that really surprised you along the way?
Yeah, I was astonished actually by the amount of women in power positions. And so
Yeah.
Elizabeth Friedman, training cryptanalysts and being the first woman to head an intelligence unit in the US military, Marie Waite, she and Cleo Lithgow were two very, very high profile, notorious, successful rum runners who had their own rings essentially. And then the assistant DA of Miami was a woman who was also a pilot. And then the whole country had Mabel Walker Willibrand in charge of Prohibition, another lawyer. So everywhere I looked, there were all of these women in power positions, and I was absolutely fascinated, and I loved it. So it was just that time there weren't a lot of women working outside of the home, and these women also had children. They had marriages in many cases, and it was fascinating.
It was fascinating, and that was one of the things that I kept having to remind myself, that this was the 1920s. And here are
Yeah.
all these women having to balance like their home life and juggle motherhood and the push and pull. Particularly Elizabeth, I think, highlights the push and
Mhm.
pull of motherhood and her work and her love of her work. But the interesting, I think you did a really good job because she had all this support, right? She had love in her life and a loving husband, as opposed to Marie, who was also super ambitious but was
Mhm.
really pretty much on her own in terms of,
Yes.
she didn't have that kind of infrastructure around her.
Yeah. Yeah, she didn't have the support systems that Elizabeth did, and so she had to make her own way, and for better or worse.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So these two women were real historical figures in history, and you've written about other real, like, historical figures as your main protagonists. Virginia Hall, in The Invisible Woman and Violet Chabot and Sisters of Night and Fog. What are the challenges about writing about a protagonist who's a real figure in history? And do you have a preference for writing about real women in history as the main character or fictional?
I've really fallen in love with really biohistorical fiction. I like real women, real history, real things that happened. In previous novels, I've had more fiction or fictional protagonist to anchor the story. When I switched over was The House of Hawthorne because I had such a rich cast from history. I didn't feel like I needed to add anything there. And ever since then, I've been moving into like the biofiction area of historical. I just love bringing these women's stories to light, especially, but all of them, and just unearthing these fascinating places from history. You know, with your work, it's such a joy to discover it and then to share it with people.
I totally agree. Yes. And now you've written novels that take place in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. Do you have a favorite era of those to write about at this point, or you kind of just go where the story is?
I do go where the story is, but I do love the 20s. There was just something, and
Yeah.
of course, I'm romanticizing it from 100 years out. Even with the Rumrunners, I start when it's sort of toward the beginning to middle of Prohibition, where it all feels a little lighter, which is funny because it's organized crime. There's like murder and brutal things happen, but to me, that felt lighter than World War II.
Right.
And it really, at the end of the later part of the 20s, early 30s, it got very dark because organized crime so fully came in to consume the industry. And then what happened there was these supply chains for drugs opened up, and
Mm.
then human trafficking, and the lines that opened up from these, just what started as liquor, continue to plague us to this day. So it becomes very serious very quickly. But I do am fascinated by the 20s. I think it's the glamour, the Art Deco, the music. There's just something about it.
The clothes, the flapper
I
clothes, dresses, and yeah,
mean,
all of
look
that.
at the clothes. Like, look at
Yes.
this. Yeah. It was a joy to write this scene with this dress.
Oh, yes, yeah. So this book feels very cinematic to me. Like you write in a very cinematic way, and like the settings, Key West and Cuba, and um, has there been any movie interest?
Yes, I've had some little nibbles that have gone absolutely nowhere. So people, and it's the first time that it's happened before a book came out for me. There's been little nibbles that go nowhere all along, but these started before the book came out. So I thought, oh, surely this will go somewhere. It hasn't. But I definitely wrote it as a movie. I wrote it at very short. I tried to make each one a very filmable scene. I did get told by one woman who works at a production company that books on the water are very hard and people are reluctant to take them on. But I'm like, really, with AI and special effects, and I mean, Outer Banks, like people can do it, you know. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So I do want this to be a movie. I cast my books. I try to as I'm writing or before I write. So when I reach a sticky point or I can't envision something, I'll go on YouTube and watch. So for this one, I thought Emily Blunt would be the perfect Elizabeth Smith Friedman, almost the Mary Poppins vibes, where just somebody who's got it all together, or who appears to, let's put it that way. And so I would watch her in different movies, even in Oppenheimer, just to watch how she moves to inform Elizabeth. And then for Marie, it changed throughout the writing, but for me, it settled on, have you seen Daisy Jones and the Six? Camilla
Yes.
Morone, the wife, and her
Oh,
name is Camilla.
stunning.
And I
Yeah.
feel like she could really bring a lot of layers to Marie. So
Yeah. Oh, I have a couple of suggestions as well.
yes, give me them.
So I was thinking, I was picturing Amy Adams as Elizabeth. I thought
Oh,
she
she would be
was good.
so good.
Just
Yes.
love her. And then for Marie, I thought of Jenny Ortega or Selena Gomez because she's really,
Oh, they would
yeah,
be all stellar.
yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Any one
So,
of them could take it on.
so if any movie people are listening, that's,
Yes.
those are some suggestions.
Yep. We're very open. Mhm.
Right. I have so I there are questions that I always ask about like writing life, author life. And then I will take some questions from the audience. So everyone put questions in the chat or put questions in the Q&A that I will ask after I ask these ones. So your writing process, you talked about your research process. What is your writing process like? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Are you somewhere in between? Like, how do you do it?
Well, I do. I sit here at this desk and I have all of my, like, you can't see it, but it's basically an altar with all the pictures, the people I'm writing about looking at me. Got my little candles, the whole thing, incense, whatever. And I try to write in the mornings, usually from 8 to 12 or 9 to 1, and then my brain typically shuts off after 4 hours. I'm a plantser, so I timeline, I don't outline. So I get all of the historical time period set. And then I build my, like, use Freytag's pyramid to build the rising action up to the climax from that. That's all set up. And then I operate with more freedom once I start going. But I do have the dates of everything that I know is going to happen.
Okay, interesting. Do you find it's so funny you say 4 hours because I feel like that's when I hit a wall too. Like
Yeah,
I can't do more than four, and maybe I'll take a break and try to do a little more later in the day.
sure.
But 4 hours is like all I've got in the tank most
Yeah.
days. Yeah,
Especially writing from the blank page.
yeah,
Editing is easier for me. It's a different muscle that I can dip in and out of, but with the concentration the blank page requires, almost like a method acting, I need like the
yes.
blank uninterrupted time, and all I've got is the 4 hours, and then I just
Yeah, that's it. For the first draft, it requires so much focus and concentration. I feel like it's just, yeah, you can only do so much at one time. So, um, let's see. Oh, how do you strike a balance between fact and fiction in your storytelling? And do you have any strict rules that you adhere to?
I let the story do what it is. I do write novels and not biographies, so I'm kind of gentle on myself with that. But I do confess all my sins against history in the author's note. So whatever I decide, I do consolidate characters. So for the Coast Guard, for example, there's a different crew on every single cutter that she goes on. And in different regions, you would have all these different people, and that would become too cumbersome. So I really just made a focus point of one real guy from history and one composite. And so
Mhm.
I have to do that sometimes just for the ease of character. With the World War II books, where I'd be writing about different resistance networks, there would be 40 people in each region that they would work with. So that's something that I have to do. But I do try to stay as faithful to events in history as possible. I really I want people to go Google things. And when they do it, I want them to find what I've told them. And I want it to be correct, but then also take them deeper. So I do try to stay as faithful as possible.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. Um, I know there are some aspiring authors in the audience, and you've published a number of books. You've been at this while successfully. What's the best advice you can give about writing and about getting published? And I know those are two very different things. So,
Yeah, about writing, it's write every day and keep writing and write the next book. It's not about one book. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So it is all about what are you working on now? What are you working on now? And that drives people crazy, but there has to be more than like, oh, I've written this one book and it took me 10 years and it's my whole heart and soul. So I think in the business, you just have to let that go. The
mhm.
first book does take a long time and it is your heart and soul. As soon as you're sending that out, you should be working on something else just to even take the pressure off of that and anything to do with it. With publishing, I self-published my first book after I got a unanimous rejection from every single agent I sent it to, and there were probably 100 of them. And they kept saying to me, "You don't have a platform, you don't have reviews, you don't have a website." So I used that book to do it all, met with book clubs, got reviews, went to different fairs and festivals. And then I wrote Hemingway's Girl, which ended up getting a traditional publishing contract. But it hasn't all been a straight line since then. I was with New American Library, which got shut down. And then I was with Berkeley. I self-published a hockey book that was a satire because that didn't match my brand and nobody wanted it. And that was more of an exorcism anyway. And then I went and I have a new editor at Sourcebooks now. So it's not like it's a straight line and oh, once you get one or two books published, it's just easy after that. No, it's like every book calls for something new and it's an adventure. But don't make them each so precious. That's what I would say. And I know
Oh,
that's
that's good advice too. Yeah, yeah, I
if you're
agree.
writing fiction. Now, if you have a memoir or something like that, that's a totally different story. But yeah,
Right.
for fiction, yeah, you got to keep writing more and more.
Yep, I agree. And you're right too, talking about like, it is a twisty and twisty path in terms of publishing. Like you get that first book out And it's not like everything, like you said, is this upward trajectory. And we
No.
were talking about changing editors. I've got a new editor for the first time in years. And yeah, you just kind of got to go with the flow in this industry, or it'll kill you. So
Or it will kill you. And I do think with as many books as they try to get us to pump out, they are trying to kill us.
I
And then it will make our work more valuable. Yeah.
There you go. So you talked about the cover. I love the cover. I love the dress. I remember the scene. Do you have much say in covers? Like, did your editor, did they let you have some input, or do they just say, "Oh, here's your cover"?
Well, they asked me what I thought, and then they gave me a bunch of things that were nothing like what I thought, which is probably for the best. Let's be real here. But the ones they originally gave, and this is everywhere, this is not just this one, were almost like, are you serious? So I have veto power, and I used it. They
Good.
went back to the drawing board, thank goodness. And then what they came up with was spectacular. I mean, we were basically tinkering with a dress at that point. But it turned out so much more beautifully than I could have imagined. But I do one of these days want to show you the evolution. Do you have, I mean, with it's for me, it's mostly veto power. It's not necessarily creative power. How about you with your covers?
Yeah, it's veto power. The last book, I was like, I don't care, I don't, it was called Good Night from Paris, and I'm like, I just don't want
Yeah.
a big fat Eiffel Tower on it because there's so many Eiffel Tower books, and the first versions they gave me were all like big fat Eiffel Towers.
Well,
I
the
was like,
Eiffel Tower can sell a book. You know, it can sell a book.
well,
Yeah.
that's what they told me. So
It can sell everything. I was in an antique market today and I saw an Eiffel Tower lamp and I was like, ooh, do I need that?
I
Like, you need it.
know.
Like, I need that.
Yeah, Eiffel Towers move books, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I have veto power. I have a little bit of like, here's what I was thinking, but I'm certainly not the last word on it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
how
And
it
I do
works.
start sometimes get them saying to me, we have to go to catalog soon. We can't tweak anymore. So it's like,
Right, right. I
okay.
know. Yeah, that's what happened with this last one too. Like we got to actually like pick one and be
Yes.
done. So yeah,
Mhm.
what are you gonna do?
What are you gonna?
Speaking of, so what are you working on now? I know you can't like totally officially announce, but talk about your next project.
Yes, I asked my editor and she said I'm not allowed to say it yet. I will tell you it's another phenomenal woman from the shadows of history, and a story that's so epic I couldn't have made it up if I tried. She's an absolute delight. It takes place in the 50s and 60s. So that will be I'm covering a little bit of new territory. And I can't wait to share it with you, but I'm not allowed
Oh,
to. So
oh,
I'm
exciting.
waiting on edits to come back for that book too. I would imagine once I get through that, we'll be able to say more.
Put it out. Excellent. Congratulations. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Okay, so questions from the audience. Let's see. How did, oh, let's see. I think it's pronounced Ike Levick. I think she's from Australia, and she would like to know what plotting devices you use. Is there a certain tool or approach that helps you plot the story? That's a good question.
That's a great question. And I use a whole mishmash. As I said, I start with a timeline, but I'm wedded to Freytag's pyramid, which is your inciting moment, rising action, climax, falling action, denouement. I just think it's such a nice structure. I do try to keep in mind the hero's journey a lot, or the 3-act structure with screenplay, because it also provides nice pillars for your writing. So I really kind of mash everything together, but Freytag's pyramid to me is usually my guide for how I
Oh,
set.
okay, interesting. Yeah, I this last time I was kind of trying to use the hero's journey and also for the first time save the cat, like
Yeah.
that the beat sheet. Yeah, so that was
Yes.
also helpful. They're all kind of they all have overlap, so yeah,
Yeah.
that's also
There's
I
another, there's a book, I have to remember the name of it. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to look it up. But she talks to you about what does your character want? What are some things that are going to prevent it? I've got to look this up, but it's a really quick and easy 5-part story structure. So it is just incorporating all these things I've learned over the years.
yeah, and that's one thing I tell newer fiction writers too that I wish I had known earlier is like to pay attention to structure up front and you'll save yourself a lot of suffering down the road,
Will. You will.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, let's see, other questions. Do you have any other tour locations coming up? Jackie asks.
Jackie, I don't. If the book becomes a wild bestseller, then they'll send me back out on the road. I'm still waiting for that to happen, but it's only been 4 weeks, so I'm trying to be
Yes,
patient.
it's very
The
new.
only other Yeah, I've got a signing at Barnes and Noble in Georgetown in DC that's opening up in August. And then I'll be at a Colorado Writers Festival in October. But those are the rest of my events for now. Mhm.
Fun. Sharon asks, what's your favorite historical novel you have ever read?
I always come back to Possession by A.S. Byatt. That to me was a groundbreaking book. It was dual period. It was one of those books I'd asked a college professor who's going to be a classic, um, who's a contemporary historical writer who will be a classic, and she said A.S. Byatt. So I've read everything A.S. Byatt has written. So she was sort of my gateway drug into historical fiction, along with Toni Morrison and Beloved and
Mm,
Tracy Chevalier, The Pearl Earring.
uh,
However, moving forward now, I've become obsessed with Hilary Mantel and Wolf Hall
uh,
and Hamnet. Uh,
uh,
Maggie O'Farrell. Those women write these meaty historical novels that are really literary and intense, and that would be just they're very inspiring to me.
yeah, yeah, they're beautiful, beautiful writers. My God, yeah. I'm reading, or actually more listening to James by Percival Everett.
Oh,
It's
yes.
a
Is that the
retelling,
Mark Twain retelling Huck Finn?
yes,
Oh,
but
yes.
from Jim's perspective, and it's so beautifully done. Just brilliant, brilliant book.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
recommend that. That's my latest that I'm really into. Um, oh, Sharon also asked, can you recommend an independent bookstore where I could order a signed copy of The Last 12 Miles? I just loved it and I want to own a copy.
Oh, thank you. I love that. Yes, A Likely Story. I did my pre-order
Oh,
campaign with
nice.
them. So I signed tons of stock for them. And Bethany Beach Books, I signed a ton of stock for them the last time I was there. So either one, I'm pretty sure Fountain in Virginia probably has some left. Yeah, any of the indies that I went to, I did sign stock for. And I think the one down, I've got some hardcovers and some paperbacks. There's a hardcover down in Florida. I'm blanking right now. Tallahassee, Midtown Reader. They had me sign hardcovers. So if there are any left and you want that kind of book, it's there.
Oh, excellent.
Mhm.
Um, what are you reading right now?
It's actually right on my desk right now. I'm
Oh,
coming to the end of it. Madness by Antonia Hilton.
oh,
It's about Crownsville Hospital, which this is like a Jim Crow asylum, and it is really hard to read, but I live 3 miles from Crownsville. My grandmother was a psychiatric nurse there. My grandfather was a mechanic. My dad worked in the cafeteria. So I've lived literally and figuratively in the shadow of that mental hospital my whole life. And of course, my experience and my family's experience was totally different as white Americans than many of the people who were there and who built it. And it's a powerful, important book. And I had been putting it off because I thought it was going to be gut wrenching. It's hard, but it's moving. It's really powerful. It's one of the best books I've read this summer, so I definitely recommend it.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, have you always wanted to be a writer? Did you always want to write fiction? Like, was that like your plan from like when you were really young, or was that kind of a later on plan?
I have two things I do, write and teach, and I'm always doing each in some capacity. I've always written. My first play I have from when I was 7 years old. I always kept diaries, notebooks, journals, poetry, songs, angsty novels. So that's where the progression went. Even a little bit of short story thrown in there. And that's writing, I'm in my head all the time. So for teaching, I'm out of my head. And I've taught everything from pre-kindergartners, and I've subbed all the way up through high school. The older I go, the more I tend to like it. So I think I would end up, if I went back to teaching full time ever, it would probably be in the high school, maybe even the middle school, though. I like middle schoolers, which was a shock to me. I have 3 sons. My oldest just graduated college. My second son is in college. My third son is going to be a junior in high school. So once he goes to college, I'll probably return to the classroom more regularly, just so I'm not in my head all the time. I need to have
Yeah.
human interaction too.
A
Yeah.
balance. I know my mom was an English teacher for middle school, and she
Oh,
said it's like the most rewarding age. Yeah, yeah, and
yeah,
the
it's a
stuff that
great
they come
age.
out with in terms of writing and journaling and all that, she might even be on this. Well, she watches
Oh,
the webinars, so yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
that's
I
great.
get that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've been just subbing now because it's all I have time for, but I can see when all the kids are gone, maybe doing more than that. We'll see.
yeah, yeah. See how it goes. Okay, any more questions here? who would you choose to play Edna St. Vincent Millay? Was the
Ooh,
question.
Fallen Beauty. That's years ago. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't even see who's reading these. I should put them on. I bet that's Jacosa. Is that Jacosa?
Judy Branco.
Judy. Oh, Judy, yeah. I don't know. I have to think about that. Edna St. Vincent Millay. She would have to be a saucy lady. She
Mm.
would be a little bit wild. Maybe Florence Pugh.
Oh, that would be good. Yeah,
She's got kind of the edge I think that character would need.
she does. She's got sass. Yeah,
Yeah.
she would be good. Let me see if I missed anything. I feel like, oh, what's your favorite World War II novel?
Oh
You
gosh.
have one.
I don't
I don't,
even know how that's like asking my favorite child. I love
isn't
them.
it? Yeah,
I guess I'll have to say the Nightingale, just
I was
because
gonna say that too.
it really
Yeah.
opened the door to that for me. But there have been
Mm,
so many excellent novels since then. I love Jennifer Robson's novels. They're set in Italy, which is
yeah.
yeah. Pam Jenoff, Allison Richmond. There's just no end. I could go on and on. Yeah.
Oh, same here. I know. Yeah, Pam's amazing. The
Christine
Alice Network.
Andrews.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Blanche,
there's
of
just
course. Yeah.
I think every other book I read is set in World War II, and I always learn something new, and it's always new. Kelly Bowen, I just read one that came out. The titles, oh, I'm like blanking here. I'm showing my age, but her most recent was fabulous. And the woman starts out as a race car driver in France and ends up becoming
Oh,
a driver for generals in North Africa. Just great stuff.
yeah. There's so many good ones, and I keep thinking like, is World War II gonna like fade in terms of the genre and the era, and yet I still see like great books are coming out all the time. I mean,
All the time.
Lisa Barr just came out with a new one. She was on
Oh,
for
Lisa Barr, yes,
yeah, so many good
incredible.
ones. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I think I was talking to Kate Thompson, she's a British author, yesterday about like the World War II genre and is it going away? And I think part of it is we're losing that generation now. And so I think if
Yes.
anything, it's getting more attention right now. Like I feel like they just had the D-Day celebrations and
Oh,
it
yeah.
was so moving. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
then just the war was fought all over the world, so there's endless places you can come at it from. I don't think it's going to be an exhausted genre. I think it's just personally I need to come up for air between them, but then
yeah,
I go back in. So every time.
yeah. That's
Mhm.
how I felt too with the last one. It is such a heavy time in history. And you just,
Yes.
after two in a row, I was like, yeah, I think I need a breather to move on, even just a few years. My next one starts in 48. So,
Yeah,
not too far along, but just
post-war,
a
yeah.
little. Yeah, yeah. I think that is all. Oh, okay. A couple more here. How do you face rejection when querying your books? Have you ever doubted your writing? This is from Louisa Sotillo. Um, you can take that first, and then I have thoughts as
Oh,
well.
you take it first. You take it first. Yeah, I have many
Um,
things.
yeah, so you said your first one, my first novel took me like I wrote it very much in the fringes of my life, and it took me 10 years. And I stopped, I gave up after 70 plus rejections, probably more than that, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
I put it
Mhm.
on a shelf and I had huge self-doubt. And I think even now at this stage, I have self-doubt sometimes when
Yeah.
you're like, by yourself in your head for 4 hours at the library and you're like, what am I even doing? So
What am I doing? I say it all the time. What am I doing? What am I doing?
right, it's like, does
It's
this
an
make sense?
affliction. I can't stop. Yeah.
Oh, it's hard. Like, but then I'm like, is that I think having a little bit of like approaching it like being humble and approaching it with like a little bit of self-doubt or self-editing is good, but like you can get paralyzed by that as well.
Oh,
There's like a balance there. Yeah, yeah.
oh, it's such a head game. And then of course I read every review
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
and
I say I don't,
internalize
but I do. Yeah.
yeah, I internalize a lot of them. Most of them I can shrug off. But there'll be those ones that every time you sit down to write, it'll just be sticking in your brain.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it is a constant battle. Some days are better than others.
right.
But
Yeah. I mean,
with the rejections, yeah.
yeah, I stay away from Goodreads generally speaking because I feel like that's for readers, so I don't read those
Yes.
reviews. But I
Yes.
can't help myself sometimes. I have to read on Amazon and stuff. And my husband reads all of them. So he'll
Yeah.
he'll flag some that are really good or bad, you know.
Yeah. My husband does too. He gets more upset about them than I do, like the negative ones. And I'm just like, it's not personal. Although I do find it very odd when someone tags you in a bad review.
Yeah,
I
that is
mean,
oh my
yeah,
gosh.
that's an
No,
interesting one.
I
And
think
I
that's
just,
oh
yeah,
such a faux pas. Like, do not tag. It's okay if you don't like the book. Like
of
everyone has,
course.
you know, taste.
Yeah,
But don't tag me and tell me how you
I
didn't like.
know. It's like, it's your trap because you can't say anything, but you're just like,
Right.
wow, that takes a really special kind of person to do that.
Right. So,
You
so
just have to think, well, they must have had a miserable childhood and move on.
honestly, it's I don't understand. But so Louisa, back to your point. Yes, how did we face I faced rejection? Like I think what you said, like you decided you faced rejection with your first book and you self-published, and I faced rejection. I put it on a shelf and then I kept writing and went back out in a year or two later and pitched it again. And I think publishing is perseverance in the face of
Oh, yeah.
you know, of no's, and it just takes one open door, one yes, you know,
Oh,
to
yeah.
yeah.
And
So
it's not no forever. I mean, you put the novel in a drawer and you move on, but timing is important too. So things happen. I do trust timing and trust readership and that things will find the readers they're meant to. You just have to.
I think that's very true. Luck, a little bit of luck, but definitely timing, and also just not taking yourself out of the game. I think
Yes.
that's one thing you just, you know, I
Mhm.
almost did a couple times. I always
Oh,
tell this
yeah.
story. I was at a conference, and I had my first novel, Saturday Evening Girls Club. I submitted them to be critiqued by a panel, like
Oh,
anonymously. I don't know if you've ever done this, and it
yeah.
was in front of like 200 people, and they critiqued my first pages, and they like trashed them. They
Oh,
trashed.
man.
I like called my husband crying from a bathroom. I'm like, what am I even doing? What am I doing? I'm not doing
Oh.
this. You know, like,
Was there anything that was helpful? Because there are sometimes very helpful. I will say that.
it was, you know, and in the end, like after I kind of like talked myself off the ledge, my husband talked
Yes.
myself off. Yeah, it just made me realize like, oh, I thought this was ready, and it's not ready yet,
Not
and that's
ready.
okay. You know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it
Mhm.
just you get there, but
You
yeah,
do.
you just got to persist and find your you know your crew, your writing friends to support you. I think that's big too,
Oh,
like
yeah.
writers groups and things
Yeah,
like that.
that's huge. Mhm.
Yeah, really big. Up is the book you're referring to tomorrow is for the Brave by Kelly Bowen?
That's
Is
the
that
one. Thank
oh,
you.
okay? Oh, I
Yes,
remember
it's
that
so
too.
good. I could not put that book down.
And that was a race car driver one.
The woman starts out driving, yeah. She's a driver, so that was a cool, different
Oh,
take. And
cool. Yeah,
she was inspired by a real woman. It's not the real woman's story, but just of a woman who drove. So
amazing, amazing. So what is the best way for readers to stay in touch with you again before we sign off?
I'm Facebook and Instagram are where I interact most. Of course, my website has email and all of that, but just for I do a lot of book recommendations, mostly historical fiction, and good historical conversations. So that's where Facebook and Instagram is where I usually am.
And do you ever Zoom with book clubs? I know sometimes I get that question from people. Like, do you do you Zoom in to book clubs around
Sometimes,
who are
yeah,
reading your book?
I do. Sometimes I usually actually go to a number of book clubs in person that are left over from my self-publishing days. Here and there I do Zoom.
That's so nice that you've had them, that they've stayed with you all along. I have a
Oh,
couple book clubs like that, and they're the
they're the
best.
best.
Yeah,
Yeah, you just look forward to going there and yeah.
yeah, they're friends now. Yeah, it's so nice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So this was so lovely, and I loved this
Thank
book,
you.
and I'm so happy for you, and I just hope that it
Thank
soars.
you.
I know it's only
Oh,
been
thank
4 weeks,
you.
and you know, it's terrific. The premise is great. These women were fascinating. So I wish you so much luck, and thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you. I loved being here. It was great talk. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. Next week is Marjan Kamali, the
Oh, yeah.
Lion Women
Lion
of
Women.
Tehran.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, she's a friend. She lives close by, and so you can register for that one on my website. But thank you again, Erica. This was terrific. It was so nice to
Thank you
finally
all.
chat with you.
Take
Take
care.
care, everyone.